okay, is a Ukrainian writer. He was born in 1954.
Hungarian,
He
right? Hungarian.
Oh, sorry, sorry. Let's just start this out with everything being incorrect. Let's just do that. No, thank you for that, Asa. He's a Hungarian writer. He was born in 1954, grew up in communist Hungary, and he is now 71 years old. Uh, and is still really so we talked earlier, or Asa mentioned earlier in our introduction, that like we didn't really know who this person was and had to do some research, look back through some interviews. He is not well known outside of Hungary, so that was a little reassuring, because I was joking with Asa earlier today. I was like, I feel so out of the loop with, like, I don't want to say real literature, but like, grown up literature, academic literature. And I'm more like an Animorphs type of person. And um so I feel a little bit less terrible now. But apparently the Academy that runs the Nobel Prize has been kind of considering this guy on their shortlist for the last decade. And he is the type of person, Susan Sontag, who we've talked about before in Story Club at some length, calls him the master of the apocalypse. And it's really interesting in the context of today's story. We'll talk about this, I think, more as we get into the story, but there's definitely some apocalyptic themes. He also tends to write a lot about powerless protagonists in the face of an overwhelming power, which we will also see in today's story. So what I've seen from reading today's story and reading interviews about his general style and what he usually writes about, today's story is really on point with a lot of his usual themes. He also, if you're reading the story, An Angel Passed Above Us, which is what we're talking about today, and which you can find free over, Asa just posted the link in the comments. It's over on the Yale Review, and it's free to read. If you read the story, it is going to look like a giant block of text, because it is a giant block of text. He writes in a style that is, as we will soon discuss, extremely structurally interesting. It's very stylized. And I kind of did a little bit of research about, like, why does he write? And in this, like, one paragraph, he even has his latest novel, I want to say, translated into English, is one big, long 300-page sentence. So it's one big sentence, no paragraphs. And he says, in an interview he did with the Library of Congress, he says, you need a big sentence to write about big power, which again is one of the resounding themes present in his work. I'm going to say one more thing about him, and then I think we're going to dive in here. But he noted in an interview with NPR, or excuse me, he didn't note in an interview, an article about him in NPR, sorry, says that his work reaffirms the power of art in the midst of apocalyptic terror. So we're being set up here like little power versus huge, enormous power. We're looking at powerlessness. We're looking at creativity, human art, creativity, humanity in the face of a lot of the changes we're going through in society. So is there anything else that
That
I
was
am?
a really great overview, Sarah. I
Was that
really
okay?
appreciate that. I
Okay.
feel like I very efficiently learned
Thank you.
some of the broad
Excellent.
strokes about this writer.
Good.
Yeah, let us talk about this story. So yes, for me, I was struck by two things immediately in the macro. One was that while formally it was very experimental, at the very least non-traditional, there are other authors doing this. We were talking, Sarah, I just read this other Nobel Prize winning writer, I believe last year's selection, John Fosse, I want to say is his name, from Norway, who also writes in this extended. I read a novella of his that was also one sentence with no periods. I probably missed his pronunciation and possibly Norway, but I think that's where he's from. Formally, this does a similar thing. So as you were describing, this writer sometimes writes without traditional punctuation. While that was more unfamiliar, more experimental, the structure of this short story I thought was actually quite conventional, if not
Mm,
conventional, very accessible.
Mm.
What happens in this story, if you haven't had an opportunity to read it yet, is that you have two soldiers. These are Ukrainian men in the current conflict. They're at war. They their unit was ambushed. They fled. They were separated, and they are hiding out in a cave, wounded. Both of them severely wounded. I think it's safe to say that these two guys are dying. And the course of this story is them approaching their mortal end while one of the soldiers has this extended monologue about the future. It's kind of this technocrat futurist paean to a time that could come about the power of technology connecting us, a Musk-esque, tech bro-esque, crypto forward articulation of a potential future while they are dying in the trenches in World War I-esque conditions. So that is like what's going on in this story. And yeah, that immediately, that duality of kind of formal ambitiousness, I want to talk about POV intense, jumping around all over the place, bravely, deftly, while like this is a simple story at the end of the day. And that was really compelling to me. And again, like per this like reading deeply literary fiction, it was a simple story in a way that was simpler, I thought, than some of the stories we've read for Story Club, for example. Yeah, so that was kind of, those were my like big picture things. Do you have kind of big picture impressions that you want to share?
I do. And before I go into my big picture impressions, this is a question we often ask during Story Club. How did you end up feeling while you were going through this story?
Oh gosh, I love that question. It was pleasurable to read a speech. It was discursive, and there was a lightness to what was effectively a monologue, this kind of speech almost. The guy was just riffing,
Yeah.
and so it was actually kind of light, and the lack of periods kind of just felt conversational. So I felt kind of there listening to this guy. But it was like idea driven, and I was thinking, well, maybe the future won't be so bad. Maybe AI like actually isn't the worst. And I was kind of engaging with these. Maybe cryptocurrency is egalitarian, like they all say. I was like engaging with these ideas in an exciting intellectual way. But then, every 3 paragraphs or so, he crawled through the mud over him to check the bandage on his bleeding abdomen. So every 3 paragraphs or so, the reading experience became much more sober, as we were confronted with this very concrete, lurid descriptions of a soldier, a person in war dying. And so I never got too lost as a reader in this kind of like futurist mode because of that grounding. And I found myself as a reader, trying to puzzle it. We talked yesterday about kind of what's the game of the story, or what's the puzzle that the reader or the writer is giving us to work through as we read it. And for me, I was kind of like thinking, okay, what's the metaphor here? What is the juxtaposition what are we supposed to take from this juxtaposition of this monologue about the power of crypto that very well could happen around the coffee table at a like fancy co-working space, but we're in the trenches? And why is that juxtaposition being presented to us? So as I was reading it, that was a sort of meta literary exercise that was happening, trying to pick it up. And sometimes I resist those because it takes me out of the emotional experience. But I think for this story, it was clear that it wasn't necessarily trying to deliver that. It was conveying an idea through a story. We've talked about the contes philosophiques, like the model of storytelling from the late 19th century around telling short fiction as a way of conveying philosophical ideas. That wasn't happening in that it wasn't quite so kind of didactic in its formulation, but I did perceive that we were being delivered something. And so because first, and we can talk about why, I would love to explore that with you, like how it did that, because the story gave that handshake. My reading experience was like starting to look for it. Yeah, I think that kind of covers it. What was your reading experience?
I love that, first of all. Thank you for sharing all of that. And hello, Laura. Laura says, sorry, so late. You're never late. You're like a wizard. You are precisely here when you need to be. So thank you for joining us today. For the rest of you in chat, hello, welcome. We're so glad you're here. Right now, we're talking about...
joining the stream. Some folks just popped in. The numbers went up. Welcome, everyone. Today, we are learning a little bit about the new Nobel Prize winner and reading his story available online. So pull up the link and get into this text, because that's about what Sarah and I are about to do. Yeah. So yeah, for you, Sarah, what was reading this like?
Reading this. So those of you who have been in Story Club with us for a while here know that I like to take notes while I read. I love Asa held up his copy and it was like beautiful and pristine, and I hold up mine and it looks like a crazy person danced on it. I had a lot of feelings going through this story. Oh my gosh, thank you, Lore. You're a wizard too. I've been calling you a wizard in my head. I love you so much. Oh my gosh. Okay. Going through this story was a real journey, like intellectually, emotionally, even spiritually, I think. And as a person who sort of reads and writes for a living, you know, this is our bread and butter, to coin a cliche. And I found myself, like Asa said, I found myself drawn in by the conversational nature of this monologue. Even though it's a monologue, it also is kind of presented as a conversation. The dying soldier, well, they're both dying. The soldier who is bleeding out does contribute a few things that really ground the story. And so it creates this very interesting roller coaster up and down. So we're taken up to the heights of human hope and promise as one soldier tells the other one, oh, things are going to be great, you know. Even though the world is overpopulated, you know, we're going to make this happen. We're going to integrate ourselves with technology. It's going to be great. And then, you know, the other soldier says something very grounding, like, I hurt, or I'm thirsty. I need water. And there's a lot of little things in there too. There's, as I say with most of the stories we read, there's a lot going on here. And Asa, I really appreciate you calling out the Conte Philosophique, which we've been reading in Sci-Fi Story Club, because this, at first, this felt a little bit like that to me, because he's going through about ideas, but I think, and I'm processing, it is sort of a long story, and it is all in like one big block of text, except for the other soldiers' interjections every once in a while. But it's two men dying together in a trench, talking about hope for the future. And for me, that was just so, it was a very emotional experience for me. Hope is such a powerful thing, and we are so in need of it right now. And witnessing a conversation between two people who really don't have any hope, like there's no hope that they're going to be rescued or saved. No one's coming for them. They are dying. And it's interesting how hope is presented in Talk About the Future. And that also was very interesting to me too. Sorry, this is all going somewhere, I promise. We're
with you.
Okay, good. We've talked before about the Vandermeers in their big book of science fiction talk about science fiction. The definition of that is a story that deals with the future. And this story, the narrator is, he says in civilian life, he'd been a trend analyst, though rather than a trend analyst, he preferred to describe himself as a kind of observer. And so his focus is on the future. His monologue is about the future. It's a future neither of them is going to experience. And I don't know, there's something deeply sad about that to me. But there's also, even beneath that, there's this underlying tension between what is hope, like what is real hope and what is false hope. And the story plays so much, and I think this is why it was so emotional for me, was the story goes back and forth so much about what's real and what's not. Um, there's some discussion about like, oh, money isn't actually real. Money is a concept based on human understanding. And um, he talks about how culture is actually, it's not culture. Culture is a survival mechanism. And we're left feeling, or at least I was left feeling, he's talking about you can get hope from the fact that the future is going to be great when we know that's a lie. And yet he does it. And this was really one of the most compelling, tense parts of the story for me was he is, and by he I mean the narrator who talks for the majority of the story, his instinct is to connect with and comfort his dying companion, even though he himself is dying, and they're both in pain and it's awful, and they're in the mud in a trench and it's awful. And he's trying to give him hope, but is he deluded? And does that matter? So just that was like my initial takeaway, was just this big swirl of feelings. And ultimately, and I we'll talk about this a little bit more as we talk about the story itself, but it left me feeling simultaneously hopeful and hopeless at the same time in that sense.
Oof. I totally love that. Just a real kind of clarity thing for folks who might not have had a chance to read the story yet. Laura, I see what you wrote there. I appreciate that. I'm going to engage with that. But you were saying, one of the soldiers is telling the story, but it's actually not exclusively a first person piece of writing. And I'm just going to read the first. Well, I was going to say the first sentence, but it's just one sentence. But I'll read the first.
The only sentence.
Yeah. The first piece of this to give a sense of the voice of the narrator and to show how Laszlo is telling this story by injecting some third person tools. All right, here we go.
Also, notably, before you begin, there are no punctuation. There's no quotation marks when someone is speaking. It's all a monologue by, Ace is correct, a sort of omniscient narrator. So I just wanted to say that.
Here we go. I'm open to anything, he said, pushing the AK-74 a bit farther away and reaching under his bulletproof vest to scratch his armpit, then continued. I'm glad I can at last say it all, since until now, he'd had no opportunity. He'd only been able to mention one or two minor details whenever they'd had a breather, even though they hadn't been sleeping because of the bombardment. So I don't know if y'all caught that. I mean, that happened so quickly. I'm open to anything, he said, right? And then it switches into this heed mode, and then it just gets into the voice of the narrator. Really interesting, the liberty that Laszlo takes here in terms of trusting that we're going to figure it out. We're going to figure out who's talking without quotes. We're going to not include a lot of he said, we said, she said. Cormac McCarthy famously talks about how I don't like cluttering my work with punctuation, particularly dialogue. Similarly here, there's just a faith that we're going to hang. One other fun thing about Cormac McCarthy, he just includes Spanish all the time. It's like, look, you don't know Spanish, like tough.
Too bad.
We're going forward with this story. And I definitely felt that with this writer, but it never felt confusing. I just loved feeling trusted as a reader.
What a good way of putting that.
Yeah. But okay, let's talk about hope. And let's talk about being in a foxhole. Is that what they call them? Foxhole?
Maybe. The
in World War One.
trenches. I don't know. In
Yeah,
World War One, maybe. I'm not a World War One
and
buff,
I mean,
but
nor I don't even know where I pulled that word from. In any event, I just love that the banality of the details, right? Like we're talking about, like Instagram is mentioned here, right?
mhm,
Like we're talking about an Instagram algorithm while dying, holding automatic weapons, while being bombarded. You know, to the point of war experts, I liked how the story named weapons in a way that felt like jargon, right?
mhm.
Like, you know, I don't think this is a typo. I don't think an AK-74 is the same as an AK-47. I don't know, but bombs are named, how the bombs are called, and that was really cool. I always love it when there's jargon in a story. I always love it if there's a description of a car and we're talking about like the rear carburetor and all that. And it's like, you know, I just pay my mechanic. You know, but like I love it when a writer just goes there with the details, and it's like, I know you likely don't know this. A lot of people know what a carburetor is, but you know, something a little more esoteric where the writer just goes there with the details, creating atmosphere. Like I don't have an image for whatever the heck the name of the bombs are, the grad bombs. I don't have a
Mhm.
clear image for that, but it helps situate the POV in the soldiers, because the soldiers do have an image. The soldiers do, based on a sound, they know it's like, if this is a this kind of bomb or this kind of bomb, like do we need to get low for this kind of bomb? Do we need to run for this kind of bomb? And the kind of credibility that those details provided was also compelling to me. But to try to loop it back to this idea of hope, I do think that the banality, the Instagram, talking about money, you know, talking about this kind of everyday kind of quotidian stuff, was the healthier soldier's strategy, like his tactic to try to keep this person distracted and alive. Did you get a chance to read that interview?
I did.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful interview in the Yale review, and it's linked at the bottom of the story that Asa shared. So check that out if you have the time. It's beautifully insightful. Like it's a beautiful piece of work all on its own. But please continue. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't remember the exact question, but I think the interviewer is pursuing this kind of talking about hope and the abstract, talking about themes, and the writer comes back and he just says, "Look, this is a story. The guy has a simple objective. He's trying to keep his fellow soldier alive. That's it. Like he's trying to keep him alive. There's not, yes, he's going off. Yes, there's this like, you know, this is the kind of thing that someone would do on like Blow at 2 a.m. You know, there's just like this like going off thing that's happening. But he has a clear mandate as a character, which is like keep his buddy alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is a lot of hope in that. And yeah, I love what you're saying here because yeah, while it is, he's striving to give his friend hope, essentially with each additional detail he brings into the mix, it's almost continuing to paint a more vivid dystopia. You
That's
know?
what I found amazing. That's what I found so incredible about this story. It's just there is no it's sort of like the whole thing is one sentence. There's really no periods. There's no quotation marks for the speech. In the same way that those words and grammar are structured, that's how these themes are portrayed. So it's like everything is a little bit of a mishmash. Like money is good, but money is also bad. And community is good, but we use community for some kind of shady things. And like everything is all mashed up. And I respect that so much. There's always a talk in the writing community as writers of, oh, do you like set down your themes first? Do you write down the lesson that you want to teach people before you start writing the story? And with this, I just feel like this comes straight from It's interesting. I felt like this came straight from Laszlo Krasznahorkai's heart, but I think he also disagrees with a lot of what the monologue giver is saying. And it's like two truths can exist simultaneously in this story, and that is, as a writer, that is such a difficult
Mm.
thing to pull off, and I think he does it really well.
Oh, I love that. I think that's so insightful. Yeah, because as I was saying, I mean, even I who I mean, whose politics reject virtually everything espoused and praised in that monologue, found myself being like, this is a vision, and maybe, you know what I mean? So yeah, this writer has achieved an articulation of something despicable in the most attractive terms possible, while simultaneously completely undermining that vision of the future by setting it in a context of death and destruction.
Mm.
Woo,
And you know
woo.
what I heard? You know what I heard in your voice there, Asa, that I really liked?
Ooh, tell me.
You said even though that like this kind of is against like a lot of what you believe in, you said, "Oh, I was like, oh, I heard hope in your voice."
Well, I think this would have kept me alive for at least the 40 minutes it took me to read the story, and the guy does seem to die at the end. But,
Yeah.
that seems like he kept him along quite a long time.
And it was
And I
something
think
he
so,
needed to
yeah.
do. It was like a final absolution. It felt like a confession a little bit.
Mm. Oof, yeah.
Um
Say more about
yeah,
that.
it was and it wasn't so much his personal confession. It was like, I ate too many Doritos and, I did this and this. It was a confession for humanity in a way, and like where we're going, where we've been. There was so much. He talks about humanity every chance he gets. He talks about the importance of community, and he almost talks about humanity like a hive mind. And I thought that that was absolutely fascinating, given that they are in a war that two sides cannot agree on. He talks about humanity beautifully, utopiously, which is a word I just made up, in and I think that's for me part of the beautiful dual truth of this story is like, yes, we are community, yes, but we are also deeply individualistic. And we survive through community and culture, but also this is what has caused this war. This is what tears us apart. This is what, and inevitably, even though we have these utopic dreams, he does plainly talk about, human greed. We're going to end up in a surveillance state. He does admit that. So I don't know where I was necessarily going with all that, but yeah, it's absolutely stunning.
Let me ask you a little bit more about that. Like, I missed that, or at least I only have a sense of what you're describing when you talk about this, like the hive mind, in that,
Mm.
okay, right, that we're all connected, a butterfly on one side of the world affects us, and kind of like this Buddhist idea, which I know I saw briefly that he's engaged with Buddhism art in some of his other novels. This is very like armchair kind of what I'm saying right now.
Both
But
of us.
this kind of like you are me is you, like your suffering is mine, right? I mean, this is reductive, but you're saying that you saw some of that here.
I did. I
Yeah.
saw some of that here, and it was one of those things that I picked up in context. And this might be, as always, caveat, the things that I see in stories are so subjective. Art is subjective. There's no right and wrong answer here. This is purely what I picked up from this story. But I just thought it was fascinating that he doesn't say like, oh, there's only one point when he says the Ukrainians are best at something. All the other times he's talking about humanity, he's talking about the global population. He's not talking about states or cities or countries. He's talking about the world, and the world is made up of people, and the whole, especially when he gets into talking about the internet and how connected we are, he's talking about a global community that he's a part of despite being abandoned in a muddy trench with someone who's dying. um And I said hive mind because it also seems like something we're simultaneously part of and excluded from. Um, he is talking about all of these things that are happening and will happen. He says a lot of these things are going to happen. As I was reading the story, I was like, a lot of these things are happening already. He talks about, oh, I have to read you this one quote. He says, "We are a tool utilizing species that has handed over the task to the tool." So he's talking about like robots and automation. And soon we won't need customer service reps because it'll be a robot. But the we that he's talking about is the people who are, going to lose their jobs to the robots who are going to take over as customer service. And so there's this simultaneous sense of like global community, but also this future is something he's not going to be a part of. And it's something that we don't necessarily get a say in. Like he specifically mentions, it actually really surprised me that he mentioned Elon Musk by name in this story.
Same.
I like that actually. So like listing Facebook and Instagram, that's something a lot of writers do, but he actually specifically called out Elon Musk in this story as somebody who is driving culture, right? And culture is, per the first page of the story, our survival mechanism, right? So who's in charge of how culture shifts? And, what effect do these two guys in a trench have on their own future? And like what effect are they going to have on the future of the world? And yet he talks about humanity like it's a global community. And so going back to, we talked a little bit about the themes of somebody who is powerless inside of a huge power machine. It just really struck me that, we're all grains of sand on a beach and there's a wave coming. And like some of us, maybe helped the wave get here, but I don't know. There's something about existing in community, but also not being in control when we are obsessed with control, right? Yeah.
That's all great.
So that was the hive mind thing that I pulled out. I also read a lot of science fiction, and this tends to be where in a lot of the science fiction that I've read, often they talk about integrating, like he has like a bracelet that lets him stay in communication with his partner or wife or girlfriend or whoever. And he actually says like, this tech is integrated into me. It is me. It is our relationship. This is my love. This connects me to my girlfriend. I'm just going to say girlfriend because we don't know. This is love. And so what I really saw was, I'm going to say this is a science fiction story, even though it takes place in the present, because it is dealing with the future.
Love that.
And he actually talks about like, we're going to integrate tech in our bodies, I think he says whether it's sewn in our wrists or it's very graphic. So this becoming one with technology, if you read a lot of science fiction, it maybe sounds a little silly, but like I was immediately thinking, oh, the Borg, or, when, Adrian Tchaikovsky, I'm not going to remember the name of the book. Ancillary Justice, Ancillary Sword. There's a lot of hive mind stuff going on in science fiction. And he does talk about like communication is what connects us. The internet provides us with communication. We are communication. Communication is happening in a passive way now. Like it's sending my data to my girlfriend. And so I think that this hive mind through technology I think it's a key part of the story. So just my thoughts.
No, that's huge. I think you're absolutely right, Sarah. And yeah, just this duality of like, we're all connected / we're alone, dying, mortal, grains of sand.
That was so good.
In this trench. Yeah, it's pretty astonishing. I mean, it's interesting. Like, one thing I would say about this story, just trying to unpack it both as a reader and writer, it's almost, and I would just rarely say this, and I feel blasphemous even using this word, but it's almost like stuff could be cut or replaced, that some of the monologue is almost like filler, not like filler, but it's like, this is kind of roughshod futurist mumbo jumbo, and it's like, it's just like displays and like the Bond touch per your watch technology, and just, it's just, this guy is riffing. It really had kind of a manic quality to it.
It did.
That adjective really comes to mind when trying to describe this. Should we turn our attention to the other character as another way in to this story, to the other soldier?
Yes, but also counterpoint.
Yeah.
I think that filler was so necessary.
I mean, definitely necessary. I don't think you can do with less volume. I guess I'm more speaking to its nature, or like quality or characteristics. Like, and I almost feel like it was supposed to feel like that. I think it was supposed to feel like a wave coming over us, that we weren't supposed to necessarily be following every little thing. It's like, this guy, in a way, even though we're entering this story through the guy giving this monologue, in some way we're just kind of audience to this monologue. And I'm just kind of like letting it wash over me. I'm just like, okay, here we go. Here's like a tech future being told from someone persuasive. And I think that's really relatable to real life, when you're like around someone compelling and convincing, that you just like, oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, because
yeah.
Well, and I'm going to just put two things together here. Your experience reading the story sounds a lot like the experience of the second soldier, who's letting it wash over him. So let's talk about that second soldier.
I want to engage. Drayton has a comment. There's some.
There's some great comments coming in.
Yeah, if anything is kind of engendering thought, please share. Drayton says, as a lifelong conscientious objector, someone who rejects war, I'm struck by the fact that intelligent men of reason with hope for humanity's future can be put in a primitive and hopeless situation, one of two, by corrupt political systems that dictate their actions. I think here we're referring to these wars. They're blindly following these men points to the uselessness of human governments, reinforcing my belief that something beyond humans is needed, the spiritual element, which this story does seem to constantly be grasping at. Lore. Community is so important, but it can also lead to territorialism. Yes, I think that's definitely true. There is explicit rhetoric around this, around Russian nationalism and kind of old Russia, the sort of heterogeneous nature of the rhetoric. I've spent a lot of time in Russia, actually, is very real and does lead to territorialism. Yes. Okay. Should we talk about the guy in the trench?
Let's talk about the guy in the trench.
Yeah, the other guy in the trench, the dying guy in the trench. Right. So if you haven't read the story, we've got soldier number 1 who is wounded and has one-legged. This is his like at least second tour in this conflict, but relatively capable right now because he's delivering this extended monologue about the future. That's soldier number 1. Soldier number 2 is on his potentially last grasp. By the end of the story, he does perish. So this is a dying character. Sarah, what does he say? And just so, again, if you haven't read the story, just so you can imagine it, the text, I'll just find a page here.
Here, I'm gonna just
you
hold
got
it
one?
up. So
okay, sweet. Yeah. So it's like,
so you see this like
yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Block of text, and then the dying soldier gets in 2 words and he says, "Go on." And then the guy's like, "All right," and he talks for another mile. Really effective, but I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Yeah. So we have this dying soldier who is, extremely concise, presumably because he can't speak. At one point, he says how thirsty he is, and there's a real arc. We talk about the absence of arcs sometimes in short stories. I think with this particular character, there's a clear arc. The first thing he says, as the more capable soldier launches into his futurist vision, that first part of the speech ends. How exciting is that? he's talking about a future and he's like, hey, yeah, how exciting is that? And the other guy says, yeah, exciting. So if we don't know, maybe he's being facetious, maybe he is genuine, but in any event, he's still with us. He's still engaging in this conversation. His text, diminishes. At one point, I'm awake, keep going, go on. And then as we move forward, it gets a little more despairing. Later, a page later, think they'll come back for us? Page later, I can't feel a thing. F visions, I need water, right? So there's such a clear, and this is where kind of going back to what I was saying at the beginning, in so many ways, the structure of this story is just so straightforward, which I really appreciate. And one way in which the story is so tethered to this narrative is the gradual deterioration of that soldier's health.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too. I get really excited. We know this. I get excited about stories. I especially love, you talk about this like simple linear structure. It's literally a one-sided conversation and
Right.
the other guy gets in a few words. But it's also like this deep exploration of one person saying like, yeah, culture is our survival mechanism when they're literally fighting to survive. They don't have water. Like, it's not culture that's your survival mechanism, my guy. It's water.
It's water.
And all they have is a flask of vodka. And it's just, there's the second soldier chiming in is so necessary for this story. The second soldier, yeah, exciting. Go on. Because what he needs right now, what he needs is for this other person to connect with him. He wants communion. He wants community. He needs it as he's dying. And this other person who is maybe a little blithering and oblivious and excited about tech bro stuff is giving it to him. And they're there for each other. They end the story. They're holding hands, which we've seen it's a really powerful thing in a lot of stories. Two characters, strangers holding hands, comforting each other. And it's so, you get the feeling that maybe they don't know each other. They just ended up in this trench together and they're not like, hey, Bill, hey, Joe. It's two strangers. And there's so much going on here in this simple story about community and strangers. Because what is community made up of? It's made up of strangers. He even says in the story, when you call Uber, who picks you up? Oh, it's a stranger and you trust them. And he is trusting, these strangers are trusting each other with their last moments. And I just had so many feelings reading this about community and wholeness and anyway, about survival and culture and all of these things.
I mean, it's so beautiful and tender in that image, just to like, again, the text is really clear. Holding a cold hand, he's maintaining an impulse and gesture of community care alone.
Yeah. While also saying, we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. And then the lies that we tell each other for comfort, and it makes you reflect on, how much does he believe? How much of what he's saying does he believe? How much of what has been written for his dialogue does Laszlo believe? There's
none. I mean, according to that interview,
I know.
None. Right. So Laszlo in the interview he basically is just like, the world's ending. It's he just, in the sense that he's just like, the technology that's coming is we're doomed. Yeah, gosh, it's
well, we're doomed, but also, well, okay, can we talk about the cathedral metaphor?
Ooh, yes, yes. I would love to talk about the cathedral metaphor. Okay, so first of all, what is the cathedral metaphor?
The cathedral metaphor, I have to find it, and I've underlined so many things in this story. Okay, so he talks about the fact that he's talking about, due to technology and due to the ease of things, he talks about technology has made things easy for us. We change and we change irrevocably. Like he uses first the example of smoking. It's like it's weird now to see people smoking in a public building. Like that's just, and 40 years ago that was normal. He goes on to talk about we've also changed in the sense that he calls something we could call the ability to build cathedrals. I'm quoting, an ability we have totally lost. Take medieval times. I love medieval examples when town dwellers decided, all right, now we have been building little hovels for ourselves. Let us now build a splendid edifice worthy of our God. And they began building, but did so knowing that in their lifetimes they would never get to see what 300 years later the great-grandchildren of their great-grandchildren would actually see. And still they began building, whereas today our thinking is very short-term. Why did we shrink? We shouldn't have. We have to regain our cathedral building ability. And do you know why? Because we need dreams. We need large-scale, bold visions. And then, F this, I need water.
Whew, I'm so glad you brought up the cathedral metaphor. I mean, right.
Thank
so
you.
compelling, right? So like what I was saying before, it was like, this is so compelling, so beautiful. Drayden, per your point, my belief that something beyond humans is needed, the cathedral metaphor, no better example of a time when humans said, hey, this is for the glory of God. This is not about us. We're not going to see we're not going to see the fruition of this. Even if you completely secularize that idea, it's still wildly inspiring. I'm going to build this school. My children will never get to go to it, but their children's children will. Whatever. Like this is deeply inspiring. And gosh, yes. And right, at some level, this is the rhetoric and kind of pie in the sky that's being painted to us by Musk and the like. Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Well, you know what that is again, that's hope. Right. What is the Eleanor Roosevelt has the quote, I believe it's her, that, to plant a garden is to believe in the future, right? To plant a tree is hope, because it's something that you maybe not be able to enjoy. A garden is more short term, but the cathedral works so well in this instance. Something that takes multiple generations to build. Like, what are you willing to invest in hope for the future? Like, what are you willing to do? And he pretty much says, I don't know, fairly outright that, we can't do that anymore. We've lost our ability to like see the future and have hope. And all we're doing now is like self-gratification and immediate gratification.
You think he says that in the story?
I think he does. Can I find it real quick?
Yeah,
and by he, I'm talking about the character.
While you find it there, I'm just going to overview for anyone hopping in the stream. Sarah and I, we're both writers. We talk about stories on YouTube to get better at writing. Today we are reading a story called An Angel Passed Above Us by László Krasznahorkai, the new Nobel Prize winner as of yesterday. This is an incredibly moving story set in the present about two Ukrainian soldiers who are dying in a pit. That is the topic of conversation today. If you can pull this story up, we put the link in the chat. I'll put it in again for everybody as it's kind of far up there at this point. It's a really amazing story that everyone should check out.
It is. And it's hard to find anything in it because it is all extremely meaningful and it is all one giant sentence.
Without paragraph breaks. Without paragraph breaks.
Here we go. So it's later when he's talking about money as a form of faith. If enough people believe in it, the project will be realized because there is no dream given technological creativity that cannot be realized. You see, the dream becomes reality. And he talks about the virtual becoming real as an irreversible process. And I wish I could find the part about our shorter attention spans, because it is tied in with the talk about money, because he says, I sell my attention. Attention is currency. I sell my attention in exchange. I can use like social media services for free, etc. And oh wait, is this it? I think it's closer to the end than I thought. Oh, this is going to drive me insane.
You know,
Well,
another vision of the future that is brought up is the Soviet conception of
mm,
utopia, where we're all, the need for money is going to disappear. We're all going to kind
mhm,
of meet each other's needs. I mean, it's almost like this guy, the soldier, is going through a laundry list of the
mhm,
most ambitious visions of utopia that humans have ever come up with.
mm,
You know what I mean? It's like it's it's this like I'm gonna tell you off the cuff, off the dome, as fast as I can, as manically as I
mm.
can, every magnificent idea we've ever had. There was a time when people built cathedrals. There was a time when people believed that we could do away with currency. Stay alive, stay alive. Look at me now. And I mean, just an extraordinary effort, and I think just kind of such a unique take on what this scene would be like. You know, if you imagine yourself, maybe you would go over and just be kind of sitting by them and holding them and just be like, okay, and maybe you would sort of already anticipate a possible death. I'm thinking about how I would never have any idea how could I possibly imagine this, but like, I don't know, what comes to mind is like, tell me about your family or something like that.
Mm.
And this character's strategy is like, I'm going to try to bamboozle this guy with like this comprehensive vision of the future and other past visions of the future to somehow distract him into maintaining survival. Yeah.
That is actually really fascinating. And that's something I hadn't thought of. Like the monologue seems so natural that I didn't question that he would be talking about anything else.
Right.
And like
Yeah.
the concept of his partner slash girlfriend slash wife comes up in the context of talking about how great connective technology is.
Right.
So there's definitely something there too.
Well, Sarah, per usual, what can you take?
Mm,
What can you take from this as a
mm.
writer?
Well, what can we take from this as writers? I'm actually, boy, I'm looking at this last sentence.
Yeah, read
For
us the
me,
last.
last,
Read
oh
us
yeah,
the
the
end.
last sentence. Well, the last part of the massive sentence. Um, a million utopias might fail to materialize, but the 1 millionth and first will succeed. It's cathedral building, yes. And he very much hoped that what he was saying was powerful enough to keep his companion from falling asleep. At this point, he knows he is dead. Wake up, soldier. I hear T-64. They're coming for us, and if I can endure, so can you. Just hear the last thing I have to say. You must never give up because life will be amazing. Give me just one little blink, please. Give me just one blink that you hear me.
Oh,
Ugh.
okay. I'm so glad that you brought up the fact that the other soldier is already dead, because I think the reading in front of us that we're being at least presented to consider is now he's talking to himself. Now the pep talk has turned and he's just like, wake up, soldier. He's talking to himself, you know, stay alive. And without his audience, he still has to keep going to maintain
Mhm.
hope for a
Life will
future.
be amazing. Life will
Ooh.
be amazing. Like that phrase, just life will be amazing, is
Ugh.
so powerful. It's just so, I mean, it's desperate. And I think that's interesting too, is the space between hope and desperation and how they either I don't want to say like feed on each other or how they relate or don't relate is it's
Yeah,
just
no,
really
I mean,
powerful.
I think history is like filled with that. You know, Drayden, you sound like someone who's maybe kind of studied this kind of thing, but time and time and time again, like a revolution, you know, the revolutionaries, what is it? The revolution eats itself. What I don't know.
Mhm.
There's some turn of phrase there. It's like, you know, this magnificent ideology galvanizes, marshals human capital to action, and then as soon as it is, you know, assembled and government is overthrown or whatever, like tyranny quickly follows. You know,
Mhm.
this is a tale as old as time. I think for myself as a writer, what I'm really compelled by to try to apply to my own stories is the just the two stories that are happening here, and how they're such different stories and saying different things, that like we're having this conversation about technology and we're also having a person dying in a pit. And both of these stories, it's like two rails taking the train to where it needs to go. And when it gets to the station, it's this powerful, powerful hit. And I think we need both those rails. And I think that, sort of more emerging fiction writers, in which I would put myself, are sort of like one rail. This is a story about two soldiers in a pit, one's dying. Whereas like this, there's two working at the same time. Very inspiring.
Do you think that went into the planning of the story, or do you think that, and this is maybe something we can't know, I mean, but if you were writing a story like this, would you plan out like, okay, I'm gonna have story A and story B and they're gonna like be interwoven, or is that something that comes out in the reading of it?
I think that, so, I've been taking this class off and on, less and less, but this class from the Afrofuturist couple, Tanan Reeve-Dew and Stephen Barnes. And Stephen Barnes continually talks about unconscious competence.
Ooh.
Another way of sort of talking about mastery. And I think there's just different kinds of mastery. There's like the mastery of writing clean sentences and like active verbs, and like, TV writers can just write dialogue. They're not thinking about it. They're just writing dialogue. And I think you can get to that place of unconscious competence with conceptual frameworks of short stories. So my instinct, given this gentleman just won the Nobel Prize, and he wrote this last year at the age of 70, deep into his powers, I think he probably just wrote this, and this was, and maybe in a rewrite, he's kind of like, oh, okay, these are my two rails, I mean, who knows? This is clearly someone operating at the highest level. But my instinct is that, like, in its initial impulse, there's already that sort of dimensionality, multivalence quality of the story, that it's gonna hit on multiple cylinders,
Yeah, that was a great answer.
Well, we're great writers, Sarah. We're great writers.
Gosh. Yes. What was it again? Unconscious competence.
Oh, right. Unconscious competence. Yeah. I mean, it's a really powerful idea it's just like reps, right? We heard the, 10,000 hours. That idea has been flaunted about. If you haven't heard that before, that, I don't know, Gladwell or one of
Malcolm Gladwell. Yeah.
Bestseller dudes is like, if you do something for 10,000 hours, you'll be really good at it. But, obviously there's something to that. And I think it's that same kind of idea of just with reps. If you write enough short stories, all of a sudden you're going to be first drafting, like, oh, of course I'm telling two stories at once. To bring it back to the dialogue idea, I had a playwriting teacher who said that every line should be doing at least three things.
Woof, pressure.
Wow. It's just like it should somehow kind of engage with whatever theme you're trying to do. It should move the plot forward. It should show us something about the character, right? Those are just three potential things it could be doing. And I just think that, elite playwrights are doing that without thinking about it, like they're, and I think that is like the ladder that we're all climbing. It's like, okay, how do I write a scene? Okay, well, it's two characters in a conflict and they both want a glass of water. I want the water. No, it's mine, but then as we grow, that scene becomes, oh, actually it's about their dead sister, and, that's my favorite cup. That, right? And it's unsaid, but we know it's talking about the sister. This is whatever. That's how we learn. Anyway.
I love that. I'm going to take that with me today too. That idea. I mean, we're told from a young age that practice makes perfect, but we know there is no perfect. There is just getting better and understanding yourself better and knowing more and being able to craft more competently. So, boy, I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, that's the journey we're all on. And if you're watching Sarah and I for the first time and you missed the beginning, Sarah and I are both writers. We've been writing for a long time, and we're continuing to try to improve our craft per the last couple points by reading stories. There are 2 weekly story clubs on this channel. We are working our way through some large and juicy anthologies. On Wednesdays, we read stories out of this big book of science fiction edited by the Vandermeers. And on Thursdays, we are working our way through this anthology of classic, iconic horror stories. If you can see that cover, giants are in this collection, and we've been reading them, getting thrilled by them, and learning from them. And later today, Sarah and I are doing a horror writing workshop, digging into the difference between the weird and the eerie. Not only the difference between them, but how can we kind of pursue a story or a text with this idea in mind, and how that can elevate, inspire, etc. So that is happening this afternoon at 4 EST, 1 PST.
So please join us for that. It's going to be a good time. I've really enjoyed our workshops. I've not only been able to like produce good stuff during them, but I learn a lot, and the community is great. So I'm really looking forward to that today.
Speaking of community, Sarah and I will put in there's a Discord server that you're more than welcome to be a part of if you're a reader or a writer. And sort of all these conversations that Sarah and I are having extend into that space. Writers are connecting, meeting each other, sharing inspiration, sharing work. It's a special little corner of the internet.
Yeah,
so be about it.
Yeah, we've shared the link here in the chat. It's also down in the description of the video below if you'd like to join us. We'd love to have you.
Have a good Friday, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you in the PRs.
All right. Bye, friends. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, we'll see you very, very soon for a writing workshop.
Very soon.
All right.
All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.